From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we talk about the 71 different lake captains who once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, from 1878 to 1968 in the age of sail and steam. Now this episode is being filmed today from the front parlor of the former home of Captain John Brotch, Bayview's most prolific schooner captain. It's also now my front parlor, so I thought I'd share it with you. Now, I previously published on this channel an episode of one of John Brotch's sailing adventures, which is pretty amazing, and you liked it so much I thought I'd film this one too. I have linked that previous episode in the bottom of the description in case you'd like to go watch it if you haven't seen it or you want to see it again. Makes it easier to get to. For that episode, previously published, he lived in this house at 515 East Lincoln Avenue in Bayview, and he walked the deck in this front parlor, so I think that's kind of cool. However, for this particular episode, this one takes place 15 years earlier, when he was a young 29-year-old, and he lived still on East Lincoln Avenue in Bayview, but at the bottom of the hill as you head towards Bay, right at the corner of Lincoln and Bay on the north side of the street. That's where he lived when this episode you're about to watch happened. Now, I'm sharing this with you as opposed to another one right now simply because I have this one already written. It's in the book, as are his other adventures. Yes, he has more than two. Published in the book that I wrote called A Brother Helps His Sister. All the sources are in there. Further details about the adventure you're about to see. If you're interested in procuring it, it's available for sale right now. Details at the end of this video on how to find it. Now, this particular episode may be his greatest simply because of the tremendous danger that he faced when he made the decision to keep going when he could have taken the easy way out. So it's a life lesson too. If you're up against it and you're facing some adversity, keep going, keep trying, you will make it. So I really like it because of that. It's on the first schooner that he ever sailed on, and he later owned, and he was captain and owner at the time of this adventure. So he'd been with the ship for, gosh, I think maybe 10 years before he bought it, and so he was kind of like, you know, ships are kind of special that way. You can get attached to them, and this certainly was his ship. 78 feet long, not very big, but for a 29-year-old, enough to handle. The Arctic, which is in the previous episode, was a big step up for him. I think that was 112 or 118 feet long, so much bigger ship, but he was ready for it. So I wanted to say this just at the start. This is probably one of the greatest feats of pure seamanship, not to mention courage and determination. Right up there with any sailing adventure you'll find of any lake captain on the Great Lakes, in Great Lakes maritime history. I will make that statement because I think it was. Don't know if it's the greatest, but it was certainly one of the greatest, and you'll find out when you watch it coming up here. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Another Bayview Lake Captain sailing adventure for you. True story. I've got more sailing adventures coming up for many of the other captains. I have a lot of them. But you liked the first one, so I thought, well, if you like that one, we'll do another one. I have it already written. We'll give it a try. But there's more captains coming, not just John Brotch, in the future. So to talk about some of their sailing adventures, which are equally exciting. Okay, that's all. I'm going to turn you over to Simon Stanhope, our narrator from England now, who will walk you through it. Have a nice day. Hope you enjoy the episode. And remember, hats off to our Bayview Lake captains. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains. where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Here is the map of lake captains' homes in Bayview to show you where this episode takes place. Its location focuses primarily on the large green arrow. Today we will be providing the true story of a sailing adventure by Bayview Lake Captain John Brotch, when he was captain and owner of the schooner Elbe, that occurred in 1883 while he was living on East Lincoln Avenue near Bay Street, since torn down. In order to best tell the story, some fictitious conversations are provided. However, these do not affect factualness of the story. This story is taken from the book A Brother Helps His Sister, the true story of William A. Draves, the schooner Arctic, and the house at 515 East Lincoln Avenue. We will now begin. Chapter 13. It never occurred to John Brotch to say no. Things were different then, and every man was expected to follow through on a commitment, no matter the risk. But it was even more than that. His peers never backed down in the face of a challenge, and if he did so now he would be forever marked not only as fearful, but also lacking confidence in himself and his ability to do the job. Customers would deem him immediately as undependable, and word would travel fast. If he said no, there would be another guy right behind him, ready and able to take the job. The thing was, he wasn't scared or even concerned. This was his life. This is what he did. This was normal for him. And so it was, after the cargo of hardwood was successfully loaded aboard and secured, Captain John Brotch ordered the lines cast off and just enough sail raised to manoeuvre out of the harbour at Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. The year was 1883, and he was captain and owner of the two-masted, 78-foot-long schooner Elbe. It was a dark, cold, overcast, late October night, and a huge storm was raging. He knew, once he got outside the breakwater, he'd run right into the thick of it. Well, just hold the wheel fast and steady on. He only had 2 crewmen aboard, needed mostly for working the sails. Made entirely of wood, the Elbe was typical of the hundreds of schooners that sailed the Great Lakes during that time. He'd bought it from his friend and mentor, Fred Manger of Manitowoc, who'd recruited him into the sailing profession as a youngster. Both also from Manitowoc, they'd sailed the little Elbe all across the Great Lakes together for 3 years. Fred taught him everything he knew about sailing and working on the lakes. He'd need all of it tonight. Electricity was in its infancy in 1883, so therefore no ships were yet lighted at night, certainly not old wooden schooners like the Elbe. Perhaps it was more accurate to say ships had lights, they just couldn't be seen very well at night. Sure, they had port and starboard running lights, and occasionally masthead lights, but these were kerosene lanterns, not really lights as we know them today, and even on the clearest of nights couldn't be seen by other ships unless they were really close. On dark, stormy nights like this, forget it. There wasn't a radio to use in case of trouble either, as it wouldn't be invented for another 40 years, nor was there such a thing as radar for seeing and avoiding other ships, nor GPS, nor life jackets, nor life rafts, nor heating inside the cabin, except for a single small coal stove. The Elbe didn't even have an enclosed wheelhouse to stay sheltered from the elements. It had no propeller or internal diesel engine for emergencies. John Brotch probably didn't carry any real survival kit either, though he might have had some distress signal flares stuck inside a small cabinet he could run to grab quickly in the tiny cabin below. There were no such things as Coast Guard rescue helicopters, nor smartphones for calling 911. Really, if the Elbe got into trouble out on the lake, He was on his own. The rain and wind were smashing into his face as he stood at wheel, and the Elbe passed the breakwater into the raging tempest. He ordered the crew to hoist the mainsails to the top of both masts. It was impossible to distinguish the horizon, as there were no stars due to the storm. He couldn't even see the bow of his own ship. He kept the compass on the desired easterly heading as best he could, though this was difficult, given the northeast wind of the storm, and meant tacking the ship back and forth to get any headway. Now that he was past the breakwater, he knew all he had to do was to get out past the low water and rocks of the port, and then he could turn southwest, and the wind would be behind him as he headed towards his intended destination of Two Rivers, Wisconsin, just a few hours sailing time. Wham! In an instant the Elbe was nearly destroyed. John Brotch had collided with another schooner, the Capella, inbound to Sturgeon Bay, the port Brotch had just left. Neither captain had been able to see the other in the black, stormy night. It had happened so fast, so unexpected, that neither ship had time to even communicate with each other after the collision. The Capella had the wind behind it, and was making such speed that it just kept going. And in that dark night, that storm, it had disappeared as fast as it had appeared. John Brotch barely had time to think. He looked the Elbe over fast, and soon realized the two booms for both mainsails were smashed to pieces and wrecked, their sails in tatters, flapping as useless torn sheets in the wind. The cabin roof and one wall had been destroyed, eliminating any shelter. All he had left were two small jibsails at the bow. Enough, he knew, at best would allow him to make steerage way, about 1.5 knots, and thus the ability to work the rudder to steer the ship. What to do next? He knew the port of Sturgeon Bay he'd just left, and safety was not only close, it was right behind him. He could try to reverse course with just the two jibsails, and make for it, and, though that would be a challenge in this gale, there was a fair chance he could make it. If he couldn't, then there was still another chance to reach safety quickly at some small piers just south of the harbour. With the following northeast wind from the storm, he stood a better and easier chance to get to those than heading back to port. Reaching either was definitely doable. Finally, if it turned out he couldn't make a course for either, then he was still close enough to shore that he could just drop anchor, hoping it would hold, so Elbe wouldn't be driven ashore by the wind and smashed by the crashing surf. If the anchor held, he could then hide out in the still dry sleeping quarters until morning and await rescue from a passing ship coming into Sturgeon Bay. But he elected to do none of the above. He had a cargo to deliver, and he was expected to deliver it. The customer in Two Rivers expected it, and was planning on it, for the next morning. Delivering his cargo is what John Brotch was expected to do, and what he agreed to do. It never occurred to him to say no. So, as captain, here is what he decided to do. He had a big wind directly behind him to propel him, and its fierce power should give him another half knot of speed, beyond just steerage way. He also had following seas to push him along. As long as those two jibsails held, he believed he could make it. For John Brotch, the choice was easy. He stayed at the wheel the whole night, careful to keep the wind behind him just right to fill and work the jibsails. As he'd hoped, the rudder worked just enough to allow him to maintain course. He was certain the following wind had given him extra speed, and thus control. He directed the two crewmen to go below to the safety of the bunk room. They could crawl into their bunks, and with the following sea and wind, the ride wasn't bad. Now that he knew he could make speed and steer, there was only one concern he had left. How could he track his position? With all the horizon obscured in the driving rain and wind, there was no way to gauge his position to tell how close or not close, to the shoreline he was. If he was headed toward the shore, he would never know until he felt the ship crash onto the rocks and be smashed to pieces by the surf. He knew the position of his earlier collision with the mystery schooner, just off the port of Sturgeon Bay, and he knew the direction and speed of the wind, 40 knots directly behind him. He also could estimate his speed. So really, all he could do was sail on, estimating his position through his dead reckoning of compass heading and estimated speed. Maybe, over the next few hours in this darkest of nights, the storm would abate, and he could get a glimpse of how close he might be to the shore, which he knew to be off his starboard beam, right side. So, on into the night, John Brotch sailed the crippled Elbe. If only he could make it through this night! He held course and strained his hearing for breakers. He thought of his pretty wife Johanna, and their 3 young children safe at home and in bed, in the small house they were renting at 26 Lincoln Avenue in Milwaukee. He thought of the families of his crew, which he also knew well. The collision with the Capella, and the need for his subsequent fast actions, had caused an adrenaline rush, and only now, after an hour or so of steady sailing, did he have a chance to gather his thoughts. Only now did he realize he was standing alone in his weather gear, on deck in the pouring rain, the wind so strong it was almost blocking out his thoughts. Only now did his mind allow his body to start to shiver. He stamped his feet, squeezed the ship's wheel extra hard, and began to sing some of the old songs he and Fred Manger used to sing on those smooth-sailing July afternoons on the lakes, when all was well with the world. Then, after a while, he said a prayer. "Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm doth bind the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. O hear us when we cry to Thee for those in peril on the sea. O Saviour, whose almighty word the winds and waves submissive heard, who walked upon the foaming deep, and calm amidst its rage did sleep. O hear us when we cry to Thee for those in peril on the sea." "7 hours later, his prayers were answered. The wind died down, the storm abated, the rain stopped, the daylight arrived, and he could see the shoreline. He'd sailed these waters many times from his former home port of Manitowoc. He knew this part of the shore quite well. He immediately spotted a couple of prominent landmarks, and realized where he was. He was off the coast of his destination, 2 Rivers. But with the wind now died down, could he reach the speed necessary to get the rudder to turn the ship hard to starboard, right, and then manoeuvre into the port? He put the wheel to port, left. It was time to find out. The ship turned, though slower and harder with that much lighter wind. He had only a couple of miles to go. But now the Elbe was nearly perpendicular to the wind. His 2 beloved jib sails, his lifeline through the night, strained and pulled, but just couldn't put out the wind power he needed. He began to drift toward the shore. Afraid he would end up on the rocks, he dropped the anchor, but it didn't hold. An hour later, the Elbe landed ashore on a rock-free sandy beach, just outside 2 Rivers harbour. The Elbe just happened to be spotted by a life-saving crew, and John Brotch hollered to them that he needed a tow into the harbour. 2 hours later, the lifesavers arrived with a tugboat, whose crew threw John Brotch a line. He fastened it to the bow, and the tug towed him off the beach. Just 30 minutes later, he was pier-side at 2 Rivers. It was 8 a.m. John Brotch and his crew tied the Elbe to the pier, then stepped ashore. It had been a memorable journey for sure, and almost miraculously none of them had been injured. Then he headed over to the port's tiny harbour-master's office to announce his arrival in the Elbe. As he walked in, a man greeted him. "Captain Brotch?" "Yes," replied John. "I'm the customer for that hardwood you brought down. Can I offload it?" "Yep, all ready for you." They returned to the pier, and the crew of the Elbe and its captain, aided by the customer's own workers, emptied its cargo into the customer's waiting horse-drawn wagons. "Much obliged for the delivery," the customer said. "No problem," said Captain Brotch. "We're ready to carry your cargo any time. Just ask for me or the schooner Elbe." "You bet I will. Your delivery was prompt, on time, and the goods are in fine condition," said the customer, and then handed John Brotch $35 in cash, the price of the transport. The two men then shook hands, and John Brotch handed each crewman $5, their pay due for the voyage. He paid the tug $5 for the tow, and knew the repair costs to reinstate the two booms and get new sails for them would go for around $15. So that left $5 for himself, wife Johanna, and the 3 children. The 2 crewmen asked if they could go into town for a bit, for some food, and, hopefully this early in the morning, a shot of brandy. They needed it. John Brotch not only agreed, he went with them. The next day, John Brotch and his crew jury-rigged the Elbe, with one old mainsail he kept in the sail locker in the bow. Then he and his crew managed to get half of one of the booms hammered together with spare wood, and temporarily reaffixed to the forward mast. They then set sail for Milwaukee, and, slowly, made the trip down just fine. Captain John Brotch's sailing of the greatly damaged Elbe that stormy, cold October night in 1883 must surely rank as one of the, if not the, greatest feats of pure seamanship, if not also courage and determination, in recorded Great Lakes maritime history. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. If you'd like to read more details about Captain John Brotch, as well as the sources for the information contained in today's video, you can find these and more in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now, by individual volumes in both e-book and paperback, on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com. All proceeds from book sales go to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to contribute to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider contributing to us through the listings found on our website under the Contribute button, as well as in the end credits at the conclusion of this video. Note, we are not a 501c3, so contributions are not tax-deductible. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. This is the only surviving intact ship that was once captained by a Bayview Lake captain, and in its case was captained by at least 2, and likely 3, totalling over 20 years between them. Finally, we also have free self-guided walking tours of Bayview's 71 lake captains' homes, using only your phone. It's simple and easy. Just go to our website shown here, find the item on the menu bar at the upper left named Free Self-Guided Walking Tours, and then scroll down to find the map with the instructions. Zoom in by street. When you find a captain's house you're interested in, click on it and details appear on the right, along with a link to the YouTube episode from this channel that provides the biography of the captain that lived there. It's free, fun, and available any time you're out walking. Just bring along your phone. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.